watching the development of the relationship between Moscow and Beijing over the last year and a half, and then in conjunction with BRICS, part of me says, why didn't they do this earlier? In other words, what kept China and Russia from coming together in this cooperative relationship? Because it's not like you're natural enemies, number one, and it's not like you've been competitors against each other. It looks like it's very much a natural union. It is a kind of thing that's both mutually beneficial for both the Russians and the Chinese. And the back of my mind, I said, boy, why didn't they start doing this 20 years ago? Maybe the conditions just weren't right, but I think the union of Russia and China represent a potential to really alter the course of the world, but in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah, I think that we have a different Russia and China relationships in today's world, especially after the situation changed in Ukraine areas. Frankly speaking, I agree with your point. Nowadays, Russia and China, their corporations represent not only their own interest, but also represent those interests from either the global south, the developing countries, the newly emerging market in the Middle East, or all countries, even some countries inside the European Union and so on. It reflects those countries who want to change their policy attention or focus back to the sustainable development, to improve their economic behaviors and development, to improve their people's living standard and so on, which means for those countries who want to more development issues rather than the great power competition issues. The first. And the second, United States set a very negative examples. It not only act as a hegemony, but also act as kind of incapable hegemonies. It's not only bad, it's sometimes stupid. It's always doing those very foolish policies. During such kind of policies, no one, including United States itself, can get really benefits. That make other countries feel very weird. Sometimes, if you take those self-centered, self-interest policies, which make other people feel you are bad, but you are very smart or capable bad guys. Okay, sometimes we all accept that realities because we live in the real world. But nowadays, it's you, United States, you keep the so-called first priorities at the first positions of these world systems. And you nowadays, you're preferring to speaking to other people, say, hey, your good livings is mainly based on the world orders I created several decades ago. And you owe me this so-called the better lives. But while as simultaneously, United States just doing those very stupid policies. And such kind of policies have nothing but make the total world become a mess. And that make other people have some new thinkings. Maybe it's a proper time that we need to have a more practical discussion and cooperations to finding out whether we can improving our lives or relations and make this world better without the interventions of the United States. I don't think that fit for the either short terms or long terms U.S. interest. But I have to say, only if the decision makers inside the United States to stop doing these stupid things and try to make their brains back to the normal tracks. Otherwise, you will see that these things just going on to that directions. And definitely nowadays, China and Russia are already finding that our two countries, we can have more effective and mutual beneficial cooperation models. And such kind of cooperations, even if we don't talking about what happened in the Ukraine, you will find that the Chinese banks and companies did not want to touch that part a lot. But beside that, we really can create more economic benefits, not only to peoples in our two countries, but to peoples all around the world. And then we just will continue not only in the bilateral framework, but also inside the framework of the BRICS, inside the frameworks and the platforms of the United Nations, and so on.
You know, sort of the other irony here is the sort of the defining event of the 20th century was World War II. And the two countries that suffered the most casualties, suffered the most loss, were China and Russia. I think of all the, you know, they always talk about 55 million dead globally, and of that, Russia and China, I think combined, accounted for well over 50% of that. It's understandable why that war has left an impression on both cultures, both societies. Let me ask you, did you get a chance to watch the debate Thursday night between Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
Of course, I watched the whole debate for that 90 minutes.
Okay. Were you scared to death, or what? What was your reaction?
I laughed to death. I laughed my ass off. I have to say that. That's inside China. We just to watch a huge online joke. It's a very ironic joke. No one can imagine that it really happens. I highly agree with Jon Stewart. After he watched that debate, he make his program say that should not be United States. So at the same time, I already produced several videos to say my comments and understanding on these things. This video debate between Biden and Trump triggered huge discussion and debate in Chinese social medias. Of course, there's a lot of joking or laughing on that part, focus on those very detailed, fragmented informations. But generally speaking, most of these discussions, rationally speaking, they feel a little bit pathetic of the United States. As I research on these international relations, I'd like to have a stronger U.S. to respect competitors. But such kind of United States just make me a little bit feel frustrated, pathetic. I don't know how to describe my feelings. It's quite complex. And also, I say that, just to mention me, there's a term named political decay. Its first was introduced by Professor Samuel Huntington in his book, The Political Orders in the Changing Societies in 1970s. Mm-hmm. And then used by his student, Professor Fukuyama, in the year maybe 12 or 2014, in his book to describe the potential crisis and threat inside the United States to its future positions in the world. He said that by lost the government or state capacities, by incapable to providing or deliver effective public policies, the United States face a kind of political decay. And those situations in US rhetoric, those phenomena would only happen in the third world countries, now will happen inside the United States. And during that debate, I have very deep impressed by Trump he's saying to Biden, say that in your governance, United States become more like a developing countries. It's quite ironic because both these two guys, especially Trump, make the first and make the most important movement toward that directions. And of course, Biden increasing more. And nowadays, we concern who will be the proper guys to be elected as the president of the United States in 2024. You know, when we reading those democratic theory textbook in our universities, especially those United States political theory, they told me the United States has a perfect institutional design. So either one can be selected as the president, even a dog, because nothing he can do to beyond the design of these institutions. But nowadays we find out that president is very important. You need to have a proper leaders. This proper leader, and of course, you are not only need one president, you need a couple of guys to replace most peoples inside DC, especially in White House and the Hills, so that you will have a more normalized brain, more normalized decision-making institutions. I think it's not only one or two guys can solve these issues. You need a kind of rebirth of this U.S. I don't know how to realize that, but such kind of debate make me a little nervous or anxieties, especially when you remember that this guy, any of these guys, will control the biggest nuclear arsenals in the world and will control the biggest, the most powerful conventional forces in the world. That will be a real threat.
I'm a big advocate for peace.
Yeah, me
now,
too.
What just frightens me is that the lack of leadership that you point out, that's not evident at the top of the United States, is allowing the forces to drive the United States into confrontations with countries around the world. And instead of making the world better, we're making the world worse. And I've got to figure out how to reverse that. I thank you for your courtesy and listening to me, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure.
This was, for me, a very productive hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
朋友都知道我是很挑剔的，防晒乳我选 KISS 皇家呵护抗光清爽高防晒凝露，因为它有媲美蓝光神盾的抓藻植萃，保护我在阳光下延缓肌肤老化，维持青春弹力，可以防御工作环境里的3C 商品。各种光源对肌肤的伤害，擦起来清爽不黏腻。我特别喜欢它做到海洋友善，365天，天天抗光抗老化，是我的保养日常。你呢？呵护您，呵护全家人，专属你的 KISS Royal Care 抗光清爽高防晒凝露。